Well, welcome into TCO Studios. I'm really excited for this one. We've got our 2024 Vikings offseason roundtable alongside two of the best in the biz. We've got Kevin Seifert from ESPN and Ben Goessling of the Star Tribune. Guys, you been enjoying your off seasons a little bit?
Yeah, it's been a little slower.
Some people are training for marathons, and some people are watching TV, and I'll let you guys figure out which one is which. So.
The lack of snow has. I'm not the person that's sad about it. So
Right.
Apologies to all of the hardcore Minnesotans. This year has been fine to not have it.
And I'm sure you guys, despite there not being any Vikings, games going on, you've been keeping up with the team and what's going on. And this roster is going to look vastly different in 2024. And that's just how the league is all the time. Was there someone, or who is a player that really stood out to you, Ben, that Vikings fans should be really excited to see in 2024?
Well, I think you saw a lot from Ivan Pace in year one, and I think that could continue to grow into year two, especially given how the group is going to look around him. I think we could see some changes there. Mm-hmm. Certainly, he did not seem like somebody they needed to hold back from or spoon-feed things to very much. Brian Flores, it seemed like throughout the course of the year, said, hey, you can handle a larger share of responsibility. We're just going to continue to give it to you. So how that looks in year two, I think, will depend on what's going on around him a little bit. But he seems to have won the confidence of the coaching staff pretty quickly. So that'd be the first name that comes to mind for a guy that could play an even larger role in this defense going forward.
Probably someone that you've thought of too, huh?
It was, so that's one, and the other one is Jordan Addison, which sounds kind of obvious, first-round pick, opposite of Ivan Pace in terms of that. Mm-hmm. And he had a great rookie season, almost 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, really stepped up when Justin Jefferson was hurt. But I think there's more to go there. Like he was a pretty good rookie receiver, but you could see the potential for going from that point to really an elite level NFL receiver. There's only one Justin Jefferson. There's only one DeAndre Hopkins or whoever you want to name. But I think he can keep pushing towards that area, and that will be really interesting. I think for me to watch, for Ben to watch, for fans to watch. Is he just going to be a really good receiver, or can he take that next level? I remember there's just a handful of plays where you said where Kirk Cousins showed a lot of confidence in him. I think of one in Green Bay where Justin Jefferson wasn't playing, but they throw over the middle, and there's 3 Packers players around him, but Kirk really put it on a dime and put it in a spot where only Jordan could catch it, and he wasn't able to come up with it, which probably 90% of receivers wouldn't be able to. But I think he's got the ability to be in the spot where he can be the one out of every 10 receivers who catches that kind of ball. And so, can he make that final step and really elevate himself to an elite level from what was a really good rookie receiver year?
Well, I like that you guys picked 2 rookies. That's kind of fun. But, we are approaching that March deadline for free agency. The new league year will begin. The Vikings have 27 free agents, and we will talk about those big names in just a second. But is there maybe an underrated name for you, Kevin, that the Vikings, you believe, should make a high priority to sign?
Well, the name that comes to mind as far as, a guy that not many people are talking about, but I think is well respected here, is Johnny Munt. He's a tight end. Kevin O'Connell has never hidden his affection for him. He brought him over here from Los Angeles, and I think last summer called him, maybe the best number 3 tight end in the league. And that's all fun. We can have fun with that. But what was really informative was after T.J. Hockenson got hurt, there were still 2 more games to play, and they had signed Josh Oliver to a free agent contract, and he had sort of been the number 2 tight end, a great blocking tight end, and got some passes. But the majority of the targets for tight ends in those last 2 games went to Johnny Munt, and I don't think that was accidental. I think that was what the way the offense played out and what his skill set tells you. And TJ is going to be coming back from his ACL surgery at some point, but maybe not by the beginning of the year. And I don't think Johnny Munt will be a guy that 32 teams necessarily will be clamoring over. Mm-hmm. He's got a role here and respect of the coaches and the players. And so I don't know how things are going to play out. This is not based on, sourced information, but just quite yet. But
we're just having a little fun.
We're just having
here,
fun.
Right?
And we're just kind of we're trying to project and make connections. And that's what you do when free agency happens. You say who are the people that have connections, and that's one that I think we can speak pretty confidently about.
The other one that comes to mind for me is DJ Wonnum. because that's a little bit of a tricky one as well because of the timing of that injury. What's that going to look like for his market? Certainly a guy that took on a larger role in that defense, certainly a guy that plays a position where there's a need. And the Vikings will have a better sense of where he is in his recovery than anybody else will, at least before free agency gets going. Does the familiarity with the training staff here, does the familiarity with Brian Flores lead him back here at the same time that injury may lead him to want to go somewhere where they kind of know me and I know what I'm getting into? A guy that really came on throughout the course of last season, and I think it'll be interesting to see, does he factor into the plan given all of the health concerns and given the needs at that spot? That would be a name I'd keep an eye on.
Awesome. Well, I like those two. That was really good. So I know that I said we'll get to the big names, and I think it's time.
Yeah.
So quarterback Kirk Cousins, he is up as a free agent right now, and there have been continued conversations between his representation and the Vikings front office. Kevin, what do you think the timing is like when it comes to seeing how the future evolves with Kirk?
Well, officially right now, the only people that can talk to Kirk are the Vikings. You know, NFL has a negotiating period that begins, I think it's March 11th, where other teams can talk to his agent about contract parameters. They can't sign him, but they can talk to him about it. And so, if he's at all interested in knowing, what is out there for him, like that would be officially at least the time to wait for. And he's said, if you go back to what his public comments have been really since last offseason, is that his expectation is that March would be when things start to get to a point where he has at least a decent feeling of what's going to happen. And maybe it's because of that negotiating period that exists. Maybe it's because he just has been through that enough to know that the things that are talked about now are not really binding, and there's no reason to make a deal right now, or even in the time after the combine, but before that March 11th through 13th period. So the guess here is that that's when things really start to take shape and you start to get a feeling for at least of what where the Vikings stand and also where the rest of the league stands on him as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at when it's happened in the past, when he has signed extensions here in the past, it has typically been in those couple of days before free agency officially begins. It's like that Sunday night. I remember a couple of times where I was sitting at the dinner table like, okay, this could have been worse timing. This could have been late at night or something. So dinner time is all right. So that Sunday night, Monday morning before free agency officially begins has historically been when they've gotten things done. And I think that's kind of the time frame to look at is those couple days beforehand. It probably needs to be done by the time free agency officially begins for reasons with all of the void money and all of those kinds of things. The financial ramifications of it push that towards a deadline before free agency officially begins. But yeah, probably, I think kind of like what Kevin is saying, those few days before free agency is probably where you kind of circle the calendar, so to speak.
So Ben, at this moment, how do you see it playing out?
Well, I mean, he talked about it at the end of the season, and I think he's been pretty consistent about this in terms of the structure of things. He wants to have some understanding of where am I going to fit in the long-term picture. I don't know that means 5-6 years down the road, but for the time being, I think he wants to have some idea of that I am firmly in the team's plans. And I don't think that is just a question that is solved by money. I mean, I think there is room to work there in terms of contract structure. If he's able to do something that works for the team and allows them to sign other players and fill out the rest of the roster, I think he is. I think his eyes are open to all of that. I think he's been around long enough to kind of understand how all of these pieces fit together. And he's talked about things, and you hear older players talk about these things. It's not just about what's the biggest offer, what's the place that is the flashiest. It's about things like what's the best fit. Where am I most familiar? Where is my family familiar with things? He talked about some of those things. I think a veteran player like him, some of those things, the familiarity he has here, does play in the Vikings' favor. It'll depend on if everything works out when they get to a negotiating table, but I do think there's interest on both sides, and they both talked about that in terms of wanting to bring him back and him wanting to be here.
I take them genuinely at their word that they genuinely want him back, and I genuinely think that he would like to come back. And I think ultimately it's going to come down to a team-building decision. Do the Vikings want to sort of, from a practical sense, if not financial sense, commit to having Kirk as their starter for at least for more than 1 year? for the next few years, I guess is the easiest way to say it, 2, 3, whatever it ends up being. And are they willing to sort of sacrifice whatever the team building downsides are to having an older quarterback for the upside of having a really good older quarterback? Or do they want to sort of accelerate the eventual transition that's going to happen? I mean, he's not going to play forever, and he's acknowledged that. We all know that that's not possible. And so at some point, they're going to have to transition to the next starter. And from a team building perspective, they need to decide whether that's now or in a few years.
Another free agent that is up is Danielle Hunter, a name that Minnesota knows and loves very, very much. What are the chances, or what do the Vikings need to do, Ben, in order to sign all of these guys? Like, is there a world where it all works out?
I think there is a world where it can work out.
Yeah.
The void money stuff with both of those guys, without getting terribly complicated, you can push some of that down the road if you sign them to new deals. And the cap picture for them, at least in my back of the napkin math, beyond this year looks awfully good. The cap's going to continue to go up as the league continues to raise it. So there, I think, is a way to do it. The question becomes, if you commit to Kirk Cousins, if you commit to Danielle Hunter, if you sign Justin Jefferson, there are other priorities that are going to be not too far down the road. Christian Darrisaw, they're going to have other pieces to sign, other pieces to add in the not too distant future, and they have needs in other places. So can you commit that much money to 3 guys who are playing premium positions in terms of average salaries and then build the rest of your roster? I think it's doable, yes, and we've certainly seen them walk that tightrope pretty effectively in the past financially, but it does kind of open up those questions of, if you do it, what's left in the kitty for everything else you need to go do.
For sure.
Yeah, I think from a practical standpoint, it's that world exists on one side, and it starts at All In. You know, we've heard about All In, and the other side of it's fantasy land. Like, it's like that's the area that we're talking about them operating in, and I don't know if that's where they want to go. The math always works in 1 year for 1 year. So they absolutely could, but you can't just look at the 1 year.
Well, you brought up Justin Jefferson's contract, and there has been a lot of talk in the last 10 months about what his future is here in Minnesota. The Vikings leadership has been very clear. They want him here. They want him on this team. The question is, how do you envision Justin Jefferson's future in Minnesota?
Staying here for the time being. There's very little that they have to do right now to keep him here for the next few years. He's under contract for this year. The franchise tag becomes an option the year after that, and maybe the year after that if they wanted it to. Nobody likes doing that, I don't think. It has, in the history of the NFL, worked where a franchise tag has worked for both sides, but it's not the preference, and so you don't necessarily want to do that. But from a practical standpoint, there's really nothing keeping him or nothing that would let him go anytime soon. And so I think in the short term, at least, he's going to be a Viking for the next couple years. And I really think that they, again, take them at their word, that they recognize how special of a player he is, and that they are going to do what it takes to get him signed.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think you've seen the production, you've seen, I think, the leadership role continue to grow. I mean, he talked a number of times about how important that was to him and how much he took that to heart last year as he kind of grows into a captain, grows into a guy that is more of a voice in that locker room and could continue to grow into that type of a role in the years to come. The popularity with the fan base is unmatched, obviously. We see it all the time. We both have kids. We see Gritties at recess all of the time. It's constant.
It's amazing. Like, you can go to any youth sport. I don't even think this is like, maybe it's only Minnesota, but I doubt it. Like, if you go to a Little League baseball game, somebody walks, the kid's grittying down to first base. You go to a basketball game and they hit a shot, they're grittying back down the court.
That's amazing.
Football, like, score tight. Like, it's just ubiquitous. And that's what he's brought here.
Yeah, it is. And I think that stuff counts for something. I mean, it's hard to quantify that, of course, but the goodwill in terms of the kind of face of the franchise role he has taken on, I think they realize that. I think the production on the field is pretty singular, so you tend not to let guys like that walk out the door. And I think there's enough momentum to try to get something done that I would expect it gets done. It doesn't have to get done this year for the reasons you mentioned because of the franchise tag, but I think everybody probably realizes it's in their interest for him to get the guaranteed money and for the Vikings to kind of just get it done and have it be settled and complete to do it this year.
Yeah, JG is definitely the entire definition of what you can do finding value in the first round of the NFL draft. I mean, pick 22, I believe. I mean, it's just still hard to believe he was the 5th receiver taken that year. If you look at this draft, so the Vikings are picking 11. It's a couple months away, kind of crazy to think. Even if the Vikings do re-sign Kirk, how interested are you in seeing them go for a quarterback there in the first round?
In the first round, yes. At 11, I don't know that like the way it's at least shaking out from a public discussion, whether 11 is necessarily a sweet spot for a quarterback or not. There's 3 really good ones that we all know about, and the likelihood that one of them is still there at 11 doesn't feel high at this moment. But we've seen how, like you think back to when the Vikings acquired Teddy Bridgewater. I believe they traded back up into the first round to get him. And that's certainly an option for that next group of quarterbacks. I don't think there'll just be 3 in the first round. Who knows for sure? But I think that it would make some sense. And there's some evidence in the neighbors over in Wisconsin that to draft a quarterback before you need one. And it's hard to do. It's not a secret that that's a good way to do it. Like everyone knows that, but they might, if the scenario you mentioned where they get Kirk signed arises, they might have the ability to do both, and that wouldn't be such a bad idea.
Yeah, bad idea, good idea.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I think we've seen the evidence, as Kevin mentions, in Wisconsin that has shaped this division for 3 decades in terms of just the Packers having that succession plan ready to go, and everybody's kind of looking for ways to do that. And if you have the option to do it, I think it's a smart way to build. And the trading back in the first round, I mean, Teddy Bridgewater was picked 32. It's beneficial. If you don't take one at the top, I think it is beneficial to be in the first round as opposed to the early second round because it gives you that extra year. It gives you a 5th-year option on a first-round pick that you don't have on a second-round pick. So if Kirk were to be here for 2 more years and you're saying, well, we want to have this guy have time to develop, but we also like those years of affordable quarterback costs, having a 5th year gives you the option to do that. So I think that path, if they don't take one at the top, does make a lot of sense. Okay,
so if they don't go QB in the first round, Ben, with the 11th pick, where do you think they go?
Well, I think there are a lot of spots on defense that would make a lot of sense. I think a corner, if there's one there, I think an edge rusher certainly would make a lot of sense. A defensive tackle. I mean, they haven't drafted a defensive tackle high since Sharif Floyd in 2013, and having that guy that can push the pocket, can just anchor against the run and then be disruptive in the passing game would be, I think, a big need there as well. I mean, you could look at other things. Certainly interior offensive line probably comes up, maybe not at 11, but I think a lot of the spots on defense, especially edge rusher and corner, that, as we've seen, those are expensive places to add to your roster in free agency. So if you can do it in the draft, it makes a lot of sense and certainly helps you down the road.
The cool part about that number 11 spot, if it plays out like we talked about with the quarterbacks all going and maybe a receiver or 2, they could potentially, if not get the first defensive player that's drafted, definitely the best at a particular position, I think. Like, I don't think I guess there could be one of each taken before, but like the likelihood of that is not as high. And so you could go into that and say, okay, who's the best cornerback in the entire draft? Who's the best defensive tackle for our defense, the Vikings defense in the draft? Who's the best pass rusher? Whatever position that you're talking about, and you believe is a premium enough position to draft at that spot, and say a pretty good chance to get him. And so, that's a pretty cool way of thinking about it, too.
We appreciate you guys sharing all of your thoughts and your time. Of course, you can always see Kevin Seiffert's work at ESPN.com or Ben Goessling in the Star Tribune. This was fun. We'll have to do this again, you guys. I appreciate it.
There'll be plenty to talk about.
Oh, my gosh. It's talking season.
Yep.
Right?
Sure
right?
Is.
That's what we do well.
Yes, that is. Yes. Well, I mean, and writing season, I should say. I should also say writing season. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.